Hello, my name's Alistair Thomson. I decided to call this Bathrobe Babbles because I'm sitting here in my bathrobe. And really, it's an exercise to help me try to find my voice. I'm 48 years old. For my whole life, or as long as I can remember anyway, at least when I had the level of awareness and intellect to realize I really wanted to put my voice and opinion out into the world, because I felt like I was able to articulate things and make connections sometimes that other people struggled with. And a lot of people admired the things that I said and the connections and the dots that I made. So this is just going to be a very casual, non-scripted, non-planned, completely organic meander into me trying to find my voice. So it's an interesting thing because people who are close to me and who know me well know that I like to talk. In fact, I'm sure a lot of them think I talk too much about certain subjects, particularly. I guess if you had to classify my outlook or philosophy on life from a mainstream point of view, I would certainly be alternate. I would be called a conspiracy theorist. Probably be called a New Age spiritualist as well. Although I guess alternate would be accurate, but I'm not any of those other things, not certainly from my perspective. Because in order to be a conspiracy theorist, the conspiracy has to remain a theory. And since the intelligence agencies tend to declassify their documents 30 or 40 years after the events, we know that the majority of them were conspiracies, that things that were taken as organic political movements and counterculture was orchestrated, or if not orchestrated, at the very least co-opted and then directed by intelligence agencies. And this is in every country around the world, almost without fail, as far as I can see. So even movements like the IRA, the Black Panthers, the Mujahideen were all funded, trained, or heavily influenced, or a combination thereof, by some form of intelligence agent, asset, or agency. And it doesn't really take a lot of digging to find out that there is most certainly a hidden agenda at play. There are so many authors now who have written to this effect. Some of them, we have to remember, were even hired by the conspirators. So Carol Quigley is an example of this. Just trying to remember the name of his book now. I haven't read it myself, but it's referred to in a lot of the research and documentaries that you come across. Tragedy and Hope, that's the name of his book. If I remember correctly, it's over 1,000 pages long, and he was commissioned, I believe it was in the 50s or 60s, 1950s or 1960s, to write this book on the system of elite hidden government around the world. From the American perspective, because it was written from their point of view, but it's a link in a chain. And I guess this is a good place to start, really, although it may turn a lot of people away. I know it's not an opinion or a conclusion that's particularly shared by people, but I think most people will agree that if you follow the money, whenever you follow the flow of money, you find out who's really in charge, or who's really pulling the strings, or the chief influencer, if you will, of any given project, going concern of any kind, whether it be a company, political organization, a non-profit organization. And then you also have to understand the landscape and the relationships between these things, between these different entities that exist. And if you really break it down, you'll find that there's a skeleton structure of the international banks. The central banks, if you look at the wars that have been declared, particularly by America and different countries, it's usually a country which doesn't have a central bank in this franchise chain system, which is really a loan sharking, cartel, gangster kind of system that employs very underhand tactics and techniques to get what they want. They lie, cheat, and steal their way, which they've been doing for well over 200 years, at least since the Battle of Waterloo. The system has been put into motion and has grown from strength to strength ever since. And without this system in place, structures like the UN, the World Bank, the World Economic Forum would not exist, because it is their agenda that has propelled these things forward. And these so-called international, foundational, diplomatic type of structures that have been established, which the masked identity is to further peace and create better relations. Really, it's to serve an agenda of a minority of people. And if you look at the origins of the UN, for example, the people who put the buildings and the land and everything together to actually physically form the UN structurally around the world, and run the website and do all the updates and do all that type of thing, they are self-proclaimed Luciferians. Whatever that means to you is whatever that means to you. But they are openly self-admitted Luciferians. There's been a lot of whistleblowers that have come out of the UN. There's been the World Economic Forum, where Klaus Schwab has resigned, his original partner from the 70s, who resigned after a short while, basically said that this is not a group for economics. It's disguised under that banner and is really a eugenics agenda at play. which is no surprise since he is the man who wrote the book Agenda 2030, which isn't a World Economic Forum agenda, but is a UN agenda. But it is in large part being carried out by the World Economic Forum as well. So I mean, just read the Agenda 2030, stop pretending to know what it's about and read it, and you'll see that it is not for the benefit of humanity. So we have to understand the world that we live in order to heal and in order to create a world in which there is more balance, because at the moment the world is not very balanced at all. It's very one-sided, and they seem to be gaining ground, and we need to create this awareness that in every single country, if you have a central bank, in South Africa it's called the South African Reserve Bank, there are several branches of it around the country, and that is our Lord and Master. It has been our Lord and Master since 1922, pre-ANC, pre-apartheid. The Boers were slaughtered by the British. First ever trench warfare in the world, from the Western perspective, was the Boer War. The Boers had just declared independence from the British and were busy setting up their own independent republic. And the British sent close to 500,000 troops just to eradicate 6,000 Boers and about 6,000 families. And that's exactly what they did. It was a scorched earth policy. So they moved in. When they came across a homestead, they would burn the crops, slaughter the cattle, livestock, rape the women, take the children hostage, usually, sometimes the women as well, or they would just murder them, and they would burn the fields and burn the farmhouse to the ground. Anyone who resisted or fought back was killed, and that's what the British did. And the reason they did that was because that was around the time that the huge vein of gold, that Gold Reef City comes out of. Oh, excuse me. Gold Reef City comes out of the discovery of that vein of gold. And that's their typical Orwellian way of rewriting history after the fact as well, is, now it's a theme park. Now it's a kiddies attraction because it's got rides and shiny things. But really what happened with those gold mines is they were stolen from the people who discovered them and laid claim to them. And this was part and parcel of the same movement that was perpetuated after the Battle of Waterloo. So if you watch the brilliant documentary, The Money Masters, you'll hear the story. The very short version is Mayor Amschel Rothschild hustled 99% of the London Stock Exchange in a single 24-hour period by spreading a rumor, having info ahead of the officials, government officials, a day ahead, that Britain had won, he started a rumor that France had won, caused a panic on the stock market. The prices crashed, and he snapped up 99% of the stock market overnight. Then the next day, the horrible truth came that the British had won, and everyone realized that they'd just been hustled. And he got away with it. And that was 1815. And ever since then, the Boer War was around the 1880s or 1890s. So this was already 2.5 generations later, where the central bank system was already very strongly entrenched around the world at major centers, major countries, major influential countries. America was soon after that, 1913, they had their Federal Reserve Act. 9 years later, South Africa sold out in the same way and had the South African Reserve Bank come into being. And they've run our country ever since. They are the ones, they have not fulfilled their responsibilities in any way, shape, or form. They've allowed our currency to be decimated, often to speculators on multiple occasions. They've failed to protect it against speculative attacks. And they've allowed the international trade devaluation of thousands of percent since they've been in power. So they have not lived up to their end of the so-called contract with the South African people or the South African government. And that just shows you that it's dictatorship, essentially, a bank-tatorship, if you want to call it that. We're part of a cartel. You don't get to vote and have a say in a cartel. You follow orders. And that's what happens here. The bank puts together think tanks disguised through interest groups. Usually the people are all the same people involved in all of these things. So all these round table and interest groups form these think tanks. They develop the policy for the bank that gets handed over to the politicians. So it gets written in this diplomatic, legal, political jargon with all the right buzzwords and psychology, triggers and everything like that, because this is what they study. And the same way you think that your favorite actor on your favorite TV show is the character he's portraying, you think that the politician is in charge of the words that he's speaking, and he's making those decisions. And he's not. And yes, politicians are not complete puppets. They're not Pinocchios. They get leeway. Humans have free will. They do get allowances. They get free reign of certain things that they're allowed to do. But there will be core policies and acts that are written for them that are dictated to them by these think tanks. And even then, they don't really know the system, because it gets delivered through these different channels and comes through these think tanks. And it's all this corporate facade and smiling faces and pretty people done up in three-piece suits and tailored suits and things like this. And it's pageantry. It's showmanship. It's a theatre act to disguise what's really going on. And I think I'm going to leave the first installment right there. Join me next time, hopefully, or maybe not. And that's been my bathrobe babble for this evening. Goodbye, see you next time.